Well, it was yet another wet weather masterclass from Max Verstappen, and evidently he can drive better than I can talk today. Welcome back to episode 313 of Grid Talk, where today, I definitely didn't just have to double check that, where here today we are going to be discussing qualifying for the upcoming 2023 Belgian Grand Prix. My name is Tom Downey, and joining me we have Philip Mathew from the Grip Strip podcast.
Hello.
We have Jawad from the Hit the Apex podcast.
Hey, everybody.
I was just going to go, hi, Dr. Nick, then. And then finally, we have Aaron from AHGP.
How you doing, guys?
Very well, sir. Thank you. Just before we get into this episode, we must thank our sponsor, Bet Online. So Bet Online is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting from your casino and card games, available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. Also, if you do enjoy this podcast, we'd love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you're one of the 72% of people who are not yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. Final bit of housekeeping, please be sure to follow us on our brand new social channels at Grid Talk UK to stay up to date with the show. So now that all that admin's out the way, let's have a look at qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix. So the FIA, obviously in all their infinite wisdom, they said, let's put Spa before the summer break because it won't rain as much. And then it had, I thought at one stage we're going to have a monsoon, especially when the cars were going out in, I was going to say FP1, you may as well just call it FP because we just had the one practice session. But Phil, you are obviously the resident American on this panelist, so you get your country's national team to talk about, and I'm looking forward to this one already. So Haas, they qualified a stunning P20 and P13, with K-Mag being P13, who is also under investigation for impeding Leclerc, and Nico Hulkenberg with his Ken hairdo finished stone dead last. Do you think they've got any hope in the, I was going to say tomorrow, in the race on Sunday?
I mean, they're hoping for it to be dry because they don't really have anything in the wet conditions. I mean, K-Mag looked okay, minus the impeding part. But hopefully for Hulkenberg, the hydraulic issues can be fixed between now and tomorrow and Sunday. But, I mean, in terms of getting points, no. In terms of them finishing a race, they're already ahead of Alpine. But other than that, I'm not sure. There was a couple teams that I was performance today, but Haas was not one of them. It's unfortunate, you're going into yet another summer break where the Haas looks like a rudderless ship, and they continue to be. On one side, they're saying they're going to keep K-Mag maybe and keep the same driver lineup. On the other side, maybe they're going to look at somebody else, but really doesn't matter who you put in those cars. Really. I mean, Teo Pocher is not going to make those cars look like, I can't even say Ferraris because those things are questionable at times too, except today. But anytime there's a sprint race. But yeah, not a lot of hope. We'll see what the weather brings to the table, though, for the rest of the weekend for those two guys.
Yeah, I think they're going to be hoping for a miracle somewhat. But looking a little bit further up the grid, now, Jawad, we're going to talk about AlphaTauri quickly. Daniel Ricciardo P19, Yuki P11. Now, before any Nick DeVries fans go, see, I told you so, Danny Rick was actually P6 in Q1, but then had a lap time deleted because he went fully over the curbs at the top of Radion. Or was it Eau Rouge? Let's not start that. Now, so bearing in mind the sort of relative, I suppose you could say relative pace that the car had, do you think Danny Rick can work his way past the likes of sort of Logan Sargent, Joe Guan Yu, etc. tomorrow to maybe sort of get into the upper echelon of the back half of the grid?
You'd hope so, certainly, and it's a circuit that Dan does have, good fond memories of when you go back to his race win here in 2014 when the Mercedes decided to go into civil war again for the how many times that season. So yeah, it was a shame that he did get that lap time deleted, but rules are rules, and like you said, it's not a moment for Nick De Vries fans to be like, oh, it's a problem with the car. Yes, there's a problem with the car, but there was performance to be had today, or there was, positions to be had today. I thought both cars could have easily got out of Q1 in those sort of conditions, but, ultimately it was just the one car, and Tsunoda took advantage, and yeah, he even briefly topped the timesheets at one point, I think in Q2, and I was like, whoa, here we go. Q3 on here for Yuki, but then the track started ramping up and the quicker times started coming in. But yeah, to only miss out narrowly on Q3, a good little effort. So, let's see how they fare on Sunday. And, Dan, if he's really got his mojo back, let's see some overtaking from the Honey Badger.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see some sort of trademark late lunges of Danny Rick tomorrow. No, not tomorrow, Sunday. Well, and tomorrow, but tomorrow's sprinting. That's a whole different minefield. Speaking of minefields, Williams, Aaron. So Logan Sargent, or as I officially called him, Logie Bear, qualified P18. Obviously had a bit of an off in practice. He didn't get a chance to get that much running in Q1 because his engineers were changing his gearbox. But heroic effort from Williams to get him back out. And it was a bit of a tough day at the office for them. So Logan Sargent P18, whereas Albon is P16. That's right. He missed out by got about 7/10 actually into Q2. Given the sort of characteristics of this track and how we saw it benefits those who, the cars who are better at sort of like low downforce setups. Do you think, well, certainly the likes of Albon, do you think he can move forward tomorrow and maybe Logan Sargent?
Yeah, I was surprised at the Williams result in qualifying because you'd think, given the way the car has behaved over the early part of this season, this would have been a really strong track for them. But I think that they just struggled. Either they've got such skinny downforce on, they just couldn't generate the grip and tire temperature in the wet. And we'll see how it pans out tomorrow if the sprint qualifying is dry, but it's Spa. It can rain at any given moment. But yeah, on Sunday, if they've got that straight line speed, they could still come through. And especially in the hands of Albon, we've seen him pull off some wild tire strategies in the past. Just think back to Australia last year where he ran 57 laps on a set of hards. And let's be honest, Spa is a circuit where safety cars do happen, even though there's ample runoff area, but that's because of the high speed. So let's wait and see. I think they'll be disappointed with today, but optimistic about their chances on Sunday. And if Alex can go forward, Logan can go forward, but I think Logan's confidence would have been dented by that off in practice.
Definitely, and I think maybe it's one of those weekends where only having one practice session for Logan Sargent might not do him any favours, but we will see. So, Phil, just sort of going back around the room. Next up, we have Alfa Romeo. So, Zhou Guan Yu, P17, Valtteri Bottas, P14. I mean, it's not quite the qualifying they had last weekend in Hungary, but it's not as woeful and diabolical as the rest of their season has been. So the notes I've written down for them are better, but still bad. Do you want to perhaps expand on that a bit?
I mean, at least their car is more flashy because they have highlighter green on it this week. Outside of that, I mean, I thought for a while there Bottas was showing his skill in the wet. He had some fast times he was putting in through all the first two sessions. Zhou, of course, not having as much experience in F1 in the wet probably didn't help him as much, be falling out in Q1. I thought that Bottas might have been able to get into Q3, but that track evolution really got him too. We'll see what happens over the rest of the weekend, but if it's a case of do I think they're going to score points, I mean, if the weather is mixed like it was today, who knows? But on dry conditions, it's going to be very difficult for Alpha Sauber to do anything this weekend. I think the positioning also would, if they had qualified a little better, but considering where they've been recently outside of Hungary, this is kind of par for the course for them.
Yeah, and I suppose we can just give it the old inserts, waiting for Audi takeover comment here. Jawad, Alpine. Oh my word, where do we begin? So first of all, just before I let you loose, as most, well, anybody listening to this or watching this will be aware, Otmar Szafnauer is leaving. I suspect he's being pushed, but that's just my own pure speculation. And Alan Permain, who's been there for 34 years, all the way back when the team was Benetton, and has come out with some rather now famous radio message, including telling Giancarlo to politely move over. They are both leaving. Alan Permain after 34 years and Otmar after 18 months. This is after they've just had a mass exodus. So, yeah, another double DNF for Alpine, and we haven't even started racing yet. I mean, what's going on, Jawad?
Well, that's a good headline for you to use there. Another DNF, double DNF, and we haven't gone racing. And it was actually Kimi Räikkönen that we remember that Alan Permain radio comment from back in 2013. It's pretty horrible. Again, they just seem like they've regressed, or not even, they just can't keep up with the progress of the top teams. As we've seen in recent races, McLaren have brought upgrades and they've moved forward and almost doubled their points tally, compared to Alpine. And, they're not going to be anywhere near fifth in the Constructors' Championship now. And, a few of us on the panel today have talked during the week about the prospect of McLaren even challenging likes of Aston Martin and Ferrari for further up in the points. And that's realistically where Alpine should be, given the fact that they're a manufacturer team. I hope no one's forgotten the fact that they are indeed a OEM and a manufacturer team. But for whatever reason, since the turbo hybrid era started, they've not been able to get their power unit in order. They've had the well-documented split with Red Bull. Then they decide to come back as a works team in 2016 by taking back Lotus, or what was Lotus, in the early 2010s. And what you could pretty much, summarize them as is a cesspool of political infighting, because you look at names like, Frederick Vasseur was hired to head up Renault back in 2016, but he didn't even last the year, I believe, because he couldn't get along with Cyril Abiteboul, and Cyril was left in charge under the previous Renault group management. There was Carlos Ghosn, who was the Renault CEO, who, I don't know if everyone followed the news at the time, ended up going to prison because he tried to sneak out of Japan in a cargo plane or something like that over some weird charges. And then, looking at it's like a rap sheet looking at the last 18 months of who's joined and left. You had Marcin Bukowski, who was headhunted from the FIA, and that was controversial at the time that, they recruited someone from the FIA. There was, what's the phrase, poacher turned gamekeeper, gamekeeper turned poacher. They got rid of Alan Prost, who was, a long-time advisor to that team, well-respected, full-time world champion, legend of the sport. Otmar Szafnauer arrived with BWT, and BWT might not hang around that Otmar's not there because they follow him everywhere. Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, and then the man who kind of disrespectfully shunned those two, Laurent Rossi, he got moved on only a couple of weeks ago, not long after he made that massive spray in Miami. And then now we've got Safnauer, Alan Permane, and also Pat Fry, who earlier in the day we found out is moving over to Williams to be their chief technical officer. So, yeah, it's a mass exodus, but there's no shining light. There's no okay, what's the plan moving forward? Because every time we hear about a plan from Alpine, it's we've got a 5-year plan, and then like 2 years into the 5-year plan, we've got another 5-year plan, and then another one. So to be a manufacturer team and to be where they are at the moment in F1, it is absolutely shocking. And, hearing about the possibility of giving Alpine or Renault concessions on their engine too, like as if this is MotoGP, that we need to let Renault play catch up. They've had the better part of a decade now to catch up with their power unit. Honda did it. Honda managed to work their way up after the dismal years that they had with McLaren, and now are world beaters with Red Bull. So why can't Renault get it right? There's a disconnect, it seems, with the engine people at Viry, Chahillon, and then Enstone. They've talked about Enstone potentially being as outdated as some of the Williams facilities, and there should be concessions for them to bring some of their infrastructure up to date. But, again, it just comes down to the political infighting that, no one seems to get along in a management, on the management level. And until they can actually get that fixed, they're not going anywhere. And, from as early as Silverstone, there was rumors circulating that, Mattia Binotto could be the person to come in next at Alpine. And, who knows? I mean, Binotto in his time at Ferrari, when you look at all of his all his time there, great when it came to the engine and the power unit side, all the technical stuff. Do they need that? They also need someone who's going to be a firm leader, not like Otmar, because, Otmar does come across as a bit of a pushover at times. And, to make comments like, Oscar Piastri is, he's got no integrity. Come on, mate. It's Alpine and Renault and your brand that's got no integrity for the way they treated not only Piastri at that time, but Alonso as well, who was keen to stick around long term. But they're like, no, you're old. We'll give you a 2-year, or not even a 2-year deal. We'll give you a 1-year deal. And he's like, well, bugger that. I'm off to Aston Martin. They give me more money. And also they believe that I can actually deliver results. And he did earlier this year. And now Piastri's delivering for McLaren. So I wonder how they feel about that.
Yeah. I gotta be honest. That was so well put. Yeah, it was just yeah. Well done, Jawad. That was one heck of a monologue. And if you want to hear more from Jawad, don't forget, hit the Apex podcast. I think we should do an episode just talking about Alpine anyway. But I do agree with what you said, and I think it's right that we go in on them, because how many 5-year plans can they have? But in somewhat a fate of somewhat irony, next we're going to talk about Aston Martin. So where Otmar came from, and where they managed to annoy Fernando Alonso to go to. So both Astons got into Q3. This is for you, Aaron, by the way. I should say. Both Astons got into Q3. P9 and P10. They were ultimately. Well, mind you, even Leclerc was 0.8 off Max, as we'll get into in a bit. So if we look at Leclerc, who did a 1:46.9, Fernando was still a good 0.9 off that, and Stroll was a second slower than Alonso anyway. Aston Martin seemed to have gone backwards a bit, and there were reports that it was because an upgrade has had an adverse effect, which is quite funny, on the car. And I know you'll find it amusing, but yeah, they kind of shot themselves in the foot today a bit. I suppose you could say. Taking a long time to change from inters to slicks. Where have we seen that before, but the other way around? And yeah, they kind of ruined, any potential opportunity for themselves. Do you think they'll hold on to double points on Sunday, or do you think Stroll will do Stroll things and, just be lame?
Well, they've got to watch out, because as much as Alpine are a bit of a basket case, and it's very difficult to follow Jawad there, so I'll do my best. They've got to watch out for AlphaTauri. Yuki Tsunoda looked quick today. Alpine are probably okay in the race if they can get through the first lap. Aston's progress has really stalled out, and it's kind of good that McLaren have come through and sort of made that jump to the front as well, and they're the new exciting thing at the front of the grid that's not Ferrari, Mercedes, or Red Bull. So for Fernando, I don't know whether he'll tolerate this. We know what he's like. He'll probably be doing a charm offensive to get everything sorted out behind the scenes. And it's disappointing mostly because they had a car and they had the wind tunnel time to really take that game, to take the car forward and take the game away from Ferrari and Mercedes in that respect, and maybe even take the fight later this season to Red Bull. But they just haven't seemed to have done it. And if what you say is correct, that an upgrade has had an adverse effect and upset the balance of the car, then that is possible, because we saw it happen with Ferrari in 2018, although there was other mitigating factors for them that year. Aston have got a big problem now in the fact that the car isn't performing as well as it was, so they're not scoring as many points with Alonso as they did before, and Lance is sort of around the same area he was before, but he's a second slower than Alonso, and Lance Stroll has a pole position in changeable conditions. I'm really surprised about that. I know Alonso's a great driver, but I wouldn't expect Stroll to be a second off of him in the same car on the same circuit at the same time. I think Lance has got a lot to answer for at the moment in terms of his performances. And, Fernando, he won't appreciate seeing McLaren zip by and start taking podiums and beating Aston Martin almost from nowhere, really.
Yeah, and in a very cruel twist of fate, obviously Honda power going to Aston Martin in 2026. Oh boy, if that engine doesn't deliver, we are in for round 2, ladies and gentlemen. That is going to be buckle yourselves in. But where have my notes gone? They have disappeared. So if we're just looking a bit ahead, I'm going to condense this a little bit now, because I had split out the top 3. But Aaron, you might not get another team to talk about. So sorry. I know. I'm sorry. And I gave you Aston Martin and Williams, so it's like double pain. Phil, Mercedes. So after what see the highs of last week, with Hamilton getting yet another record pole position, more than one way of it being a record pole position. He surprised everybody a bit by putting that Merc P4 when his teammate is only P8. Mind you, that's an improvement on P18, I suppose you could say. We've seen time and time again just how good Hamilton is in the wet, and he's proved it once again today. Do you think he can? He'll be starting P3 because I haven't actually mentioned it, but I should have mentioned it. Max, as I think a lot of you know, will has a 5-place grid penalty for a new gearbox. He'll be starting P6. So Hamilton will be starting P3. He'll be on the. I think he'll be on the clean side of the
clean side.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I thought so. He'll be on the clean side of the grid. Could we see Hamilton leading coming out of La Source? Because if Leclerc perhaps moves to cover off Checo, or Checo has a bad start, maybe seeing P2, just have a little look.
Yep. I mean, he's as long as he actually is awake compared to last week, it's already going to be a better start. And if he does, I mean, it's going to be a very intriguing start with the fact that you're going to have Leclerc, you're going to have and Sergio Perez up there too. So possibility of having a chance in turn 1 going up through Eau Rouge is great. The notion that he'll have the lead after Eau Rouge is probably not very high. But to get it into fourth place, considering the downforce aero limitations they seem to have, and even with the upgrades they brought, is solid. We'll see what they can do in terms of race pace. I'm curious as to what they will do with race pace tomorrow, but out-qualifying your teammate by 8/10 is always a great thing. He's been doing, like, unlike last year where it seemed like the energies and everything were in the corner of George. George was able to respond and do everything with the car while Lewis struggled. I think it's gone the other way this year, where Lewis has been much better with the car, and he's shown it with some of these results and getting a pole and stuff like that. So if it continues to be a mixed weekend with weather, you can never count him out, but those limitations with the car are going to be more pronounced, especially going down some of the long straights that Spa has. But to get a fourth place qualifying run net third is a good thing for Mercedes considering their circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you made a good point when you said they are a bit aero limited, and they do seem to be a bit more draggy. So it might benefit them in the middle sector tomorrow. And the Merc is pretty good on race pace. So I think I certainly think Hamilton will have a good chance tomorrow, and he loves this circuit anyway. So, but Jawad, McLaren. So it's if it. A couple of weeks ago, it felt a bit odd we talked about them this late in the show, because obviously we could go from bottom to top. Now it's become the norm. So do you think they'll be a bit disappointed with getting P6 and P7, which is actually going to be P5 and P7? Piastri out-qualifying Norris. Norris did have a couple of issues in Q1, only just made it through. But Piastri, for a split second, I thought was going to go onto provisional pole. Ultimately, didn't quite happen. Bit disappointing because I really wanted to see that. But are McLaren back?
Yeah, like you said, Tom, I was certainly hoping, from what we saw in Q2, that Oscar could be in a shout for pole position. And immediately it was like, wow, this is a leg up on Ricciardo last year, because how many times did we see him out-qualify Norris? But yeah, I feel like, they probably, on the outside, won't say that they're disappointed, but internally they will be disappointed that they were, I think it was like, what was the gap ultimately from pole to where they were? It was huge, because it was 0.8 of a second between the pole sitter and second place. So yeah, they'd be a bit confused about that. I think as well, because it wasn't until Q3, if I'm correct, that they enabled DRS as well because of the changeable conditions. So I feel like they probably benefited. I might be wrong here. They might have benefited when there was no DRS and they were setting those quick times in Q2. But look, I have a feeling that, because it's going to be a lot cooler on Sunday, hopefully it's going to be dry as well. McLaren, as we've seen over the last two races, in different conditions, have been able to switch on their tires, no matter which tire it is, no matter what temperature it is. I feel like, given that the Ferraris are so sensitive to anything, it's almost a surprise that they found conditions this weekend that actually suited them in qualifying. But the race will be a different story, and I'm sure you guys will talk more about that later. That, yeah, we might see McLaren benefit come race day, but we'll see tomorrow as well in the sprint. But again, it's almost nosebleed territory compared to where they were a few races ago, when we would be talking about them at the start of the show as opposed to the end.
Yeah, they've definitely worked their way back up the grid in spectacular style. It's to the point where if it was, if they made that progress in a digital game, they'd probably get accused of cheating. Who knows? Maybe they spent too much on the catering budget. I guess we'll find out later in the year, because apparently some other teams are now rumoured, but that's all that's all hogwash until anything's confirmed. Aaron, I'm going to renege on what I said earlier, and looking at the time, we do have enough time to talk about the top three separately. Unfortunately, for now, you get Carlos Sainz, who the only note I've got next to him is starts P4. He qualified P5 on the road, but thanks to Max's gearbox penalty, he starts P4. He's kind of stuck in no man's land a bit. He's been quicker than Leclerc in the last few races. The last weekend out in Hungary, obviously started on the soft and then had to sit behind Leclerc, burning up those softs. Do you think we can see more of the same this weekend, whilst Ferrari sort of give him a sort of like charcuterie board of strategy options?
Well, I feel a bit sorry for Carlos Sainz because he was actually only a couple of tenths slower than his teammate, who's ended up on pole position. And within that couple of tenths, you've managed to squeeze a Red Bull and a Mercedes. So he can feel a little bit hard done by there because a couple of tenths off of Leclerc isn't a huge amount of deficit, and that's kind of where you'd probably expect Carlos to be. And it's cost him 3 positions on the grid. So a little bit rough on him, and he had some speed, but the Ferrari power unit's quick down the kind of where we'd expect him to be. As to what strategy they'll give him, who even knows what strategy Ferrari are going to come out with next? Let's be honest. It's they better start checking for their strategies now and formulating everything from Friday afternoon. Unfortunately, he's been outperformed by his teammate, but then everyone was outperformed by Verstappen quite comprehensively. So he's in the mix. Yeah, it's not too bad at qualifying for Carlos.
Yeah, he's sort of just going about his business at the minute. That sounds so wrong. Let me rephrase that. He's going about doing the job he needs to do. That sounds a bit better. There's another one for the Clips channel, Aidan. But Phil, Checo P3, given he's been out to QC more than he has recently. I'll start on the front row tomorrow, but his lineups and source motion, the grip, blah, blah, blah. We've seen a little bit of resurgence from him, you could say. He was making waves last week in Hungary. Was voted driver of the day. Do you think there's the sort of, just seeing Danny Rick get into that AlphaTauri and basically hit the ground running? I don't want to speculate, but do you think that's sort of giving him a bit of a kick at the proverbial, and he's gone, oh, hang on a minute, I need to get a move on, kind of thing?
I think that's happened for both him and Yuki Tsunoda personally, Tom. Because I really, for all the pace that Yuki Tsunoda has and speed or whatever, I think he's taken a step forward too. So it must be a good swift kick for both of them. For Checo, if you just give him something that's reasonable, you give him a reasonable car, the guy is a top 5, he'll get top 5s, no problem. And legitimately, that's really all you need. I know he wants to finish second in the Drivers' Championship again. But he had hopes earlier in the year when he had won those 2 races for more, but that was never going to happen. Getting this qualifying run is a good thing for him and a good momentum builder into the rest of the weekend. And we'll see what he can do in the second, in the Saturday in sprints and all, and the sprint qualifying. But he has a chance on Sunday. If he can get a really good start, you never know. He could run off, minus a full safety car. He could run off with the deal because of the pace of the car. So good on Checo, good on that side of the garage for them. And if it took Danny Rick for him to wake up, it's one thing. I mean, he's a good enough driver that he knows he can do that. I think other things were in play, but now they're like, well, let's switch the car on. Let's give him what he needs so that he doesn't look like, whatever, just a F3 driver or something or whatever, somebody who's like out of sorts. So credit to him, and we'll see what he does on Sunday in the start. I think that'll definitely be the key for what happens with the rest of his race, of course.
Yeah, definitely. And it's it is nice to see Checo doing well because I do like the guy, but you've got to have a bit of an edge about you in F1, especially when you're in that Red Bull environment. But Jawad, Leclerc, obviously you qualified P2, but we'll start from P1 tomorrow. This is 4 years since his first win, where obviously it's a very sad weekend of 2019. He's gone well round here in the past. Even when he was in that dog of a Ferrari in 2021. 2020 really. 2021 wasn't much better. Do you think he can, certainly hold off Checo and maybe maybe the likes of his teammate and Hamilton and so behind him, and then ultimately, let's be fair, Max is going to be romping through that field. There are only 5 cars anyway. Do you think he's even got a sniff of getting a victory, or do you think it's over by about lap 4?
Probably not as early as lap 4, but I don't think he's in a sniff of the victory. That car, just in terms of its race pace, it's hard to say, and I feel like they'd be lucky to walk away with a podium. I'm sure he'll, agitate Perez for a little bit, but that Red Bull is much quicker. Hamilton, I'm sure, will find a way past as well. So, yeah, and I don't think Sainz is going to be let past, because let's, go back over the last couple of races and see any time that Sainz has come up behind Leclerc and has asked to be let go because he's quicker, the team have pretty much ignored him or, said, no, we're not going to let you pass. So, Leclerc will be the lead Ferrari, but I don't feel like he's going to be in for a shot of the win. And like I said earlier, I feel like, McLaren, in terms of their race pace, could be better as well. And it's difficult to say, given that, practice, there was no representative running on dry tires, and we expect Sunday to be dry. So, yeah, I feel like it's going to be a day of pain for Ferrari. So, they can lap up the joy and the jubilation of starting where they will be now, but I don't think it's going to last come Sunday.
No, and and the man who is likely going to take that, hopefully nothing. Obviously, I'm going to Max fan. I say hopefully nothing happens. I think it is inevitable. Aaron, Max, he put his car P1 on the road. It looked like quality was going to be close, and he then put an 8/10 gap between him and Leclerc. He's going to start P6. What lap is he going to take the lead on? And will it be single figures?
Lap 1. No, I'm being facetious there. I mean, it probably won't take him very long. The only hope everybody else has is if he's collected in an incident on lap 1 at La Source or at Les Combes, because they're 2 big breaking points. I mean, we've seen cars be skittled at La Source. Just think 2012. Hulkenberg went for a ride in 2018 as well. So, sorry, it was Alonso, wasn't he? He's sent flying over the Sauber. So it's a dangerous area of the grid to start. I mean, we saw that last weekend with the 2 Alpines. They got collected in an incident that was no fault of their own. The way Max drives, sometimes you think he'll be fine. Sometimes you're like, he might just be the cause of this. But he knows he's got the pace. He'll know that as long as he gets through the first lap cleanly, he'll probably reach the front of the field in pretty short order. And he doesn't need to take any risks, really. He was fortunate to get through into qualifying 3 today, because he wanted to do a different strategy in Q2, but his race engineer GP sort of overruled him, and Max wasn't happy about it. And we heard that on the radio. He did apologize after he'd taken pole position, but if it hadn't been for his engineer, he might not have been in Q3 to take said pole position. Then, he's starting right in the midfield, and that's really where it gets a bit dicey. But he showed last year he can work his way through there, no problem at all. So it probably is just a case of what lap is he going to get into the lead and then just disappear from everybody. everybody else is just in a race for a podium, and crossing their fingers that some form of bad luck befalls him. I mean, without wanting to wish ill fortune on the guy, and you can see from my background over here that I'm not really a Max Verstappen fan. You don't want things to befall him that are negative, but from an entertainment point of view, him getting a puncture on lap 1 and seeing how much he can come back through the field would be pretty fun, wouldn't it? Seeing everybody else can still beat him, or if he can just catch them up anyway. So I think that's what everyone else would be hoping for. Something to fall his way in terms of bad luck, so that he can't win for the 8th race in a row.
Yeah, as much as I like Max, part of me was thinking, if he does go out in Q2, it will spice it up a bit. But no, he has done what he has done so well this year. But chaps, just to sort of like round this out quickly, Phil, give me your Sunday podium and a bold prediction.
Verstappen. Let's see. I'm gonna say Checo, and I'll say Oscar Piastri gets his first career podium finally. Bold prediction. I keep on going with this bold prediction, and I'm going to keep on doing it until it happens. That Logan Sargent will get a point.
Manifesting. I like it. Jawad, what's your podium and bold prediction for Sunday?
Let's go same as last time out in Hungary, but with Hamilton P2 and Lando P3. Bold prediction is both Ferraris get skittled at turn 1.
I don't even know if that's bold these days. Aaron, what's your podium and bold prediction, mate?
Just on Jawaz, is Bottas going to go bowling again?
Oh, please no.
Yes, let's get the Wii Sports back up and running.
Love it.
If anyone still owns a Wii.
I don't know. Do kids these days know what a Wii is?
Not Nintendo one, but go on then. What's your podium?
Verstappen, Perez, Norris, and then bold prediction of Alpine will score points.
It's a mad world where that's a bold prediction. Okay. So, Phil, like I mentioned at the start, you're from the Grip Strip podcast. Where can we find you?
You can find us basically where you hear podcasts, anywhere you hear podcasts. You can find the Grip Strip podcast. You can find at Grip Strip Pod on what used to be Twitter. You can find me at Philip G. Mathew or PG Mathew 28, and my co-host Josh Huffine at JP Huffine. We can find it on YouTube at Grip Strip Podcast, and my website, philipgmathew.com. If it goes fast, we usually talk about it on the Grip Strip Podcast. So thanks, Tom. Great work as always. Great being on with Aaron and Jawad. So we're hopefully we'll get this one. We'll keep on going with this. Love being on the Grid Talk.
Oh, God, yeah. We're not going anywhere, Phil. Don't you worry. Jawad, your part hit the apex. Where are you?
Yeah, so I was going to say Twitter, but it's not Twitter anymore. The logo looks more like a porn site. But yeah, you can find our account on that at Hit the Apex Media. There's a link tree as well. The podcast itself is on all good podcast platforms, and I write articles for a website called The Raw and here and there for F1 Chronicle 2. And just echoing what Phil said, great to be on the show. Great job as always, Tom and Aaron. So love Grid Talk, and I'm wearing the Grid Talk top today as well. So yeah, go out and get your Grid Talk merchandise, people.
Yes, lovely. That caught me off guard then, Jawad, I gotta say, but thank you, mate. Aaron, you are, I say you're passed off, you are AHGP. Are you on this X-rated website as well as other places?
X-rated website. God, what has this descended into? Yes, I am. It's at AHGP Pod, and you can find my personal Twitter or whatever it is now, Aaron Harper 41, where you'll see my work for F1 Chronicle from time to time. I write for Inside F2 as well, and I'm a journalist as well with a radio station in the south of England. You can find AXGP Pod everywhere you find a podcast, and you can find it on YouTube. I do loads of shorts on YouTube, so drivers to watch, classic races, a little bit of F1 23 content. I downloaded F1 Manager 23 today, so there'll be some more of that coming as well. And you can also get your Grid Talk coasters if we continue the theme of merchandise. So make sure you go onto the website to find those.
Lovely stuff. Thank you, Aaron. And yes, I am. I'm obviously one of the hosts here. I also a panelist from time to time. If you want to find me personally, don't. But if you really do, if you look at my handle on Instagram and that Threads thing, I don't have Twitter or whatever it's called these days. My handle is at Chungus Humongous 94. Yes, that is real because my nickname is Big Chungus. But Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, like this one, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to both qualifying and race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. Also, make sure you subscribe so you are the first to know when each new episode is released. We'll be back soon, tomorrow to be precise, with plenty more F1 content. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.